Trackmania Nations Forever is a racing game that features an offline campaign made out of 65 tracks, which are separated in 5 different groups, going all the way from white, to green, to blue, to red, and finally to black. To put it in a simple way, let's just say that the white category showcases a bunch of maps that are fairly easy and a friendly introduction to the newer players, and the black category is basically hell. 65 may seem like a big number, but believe me when I say, there is no track that an average experienced player can't recall playing. This happens because every single map in the campaign has its very own touch of uniqueness. AO1 is a memorable map because of how simple yet hard to master it is. BO9 is an unforgettable map because of how creative and unique it feels. AO7 is also a memorable map because of how tricky it is to nail every single corner, and so on. But with every good thing comes a bad thing. There are tracks which are unforgettable for not so good reasons. Some maps are just avoided by the majority of the player base because of how clunky and awkward they feel to drive on, or because they're just way too hard. And there is one map that across years and years of the game's existence became one of the least desirable maps to drive on by the majority of the community. In this video, we'll talk about the world record history of one of the most infamous maps in Trackmania, AO6. If you find yourself playing Trackmania for the first time, the first thing you're probably going to try to do is complete the offline campaign. It is an amazing way of tracking your progress in the game, as there are visual indicators basically everywhere that allow you to clearly see if you're doing better or worse than the last time you've played. In each map there are 4 different set times that you have to beat in order to earn medals, which will help you unlocking harder stages of the campaign later on. Your main goal as a new player should be to get all the gold medals, as the gold medal time is already pretty solid for someone with not so much experience. After you've done that, your next big achievement should be to get all the author medals, which are the reward for beating the time of the creator of the map. So you start a beautiful, enthusiastic journey to earn every single green and yellow beauty with your blood, sweat, and tears, and soon enough you realize, hey, this is actually pretty easy. AO1, AO2, AO3, 4 and 5 are pretty easy author times. And then you compare yourself with the monstrosity that is AO6. It doesn't exactly look like a Dark Souls boss, but it's pretty damn close. At a first glance it looks like a piece of cake, it's just a bunch of jumps, a right turn and finish. Wrong. These jumps are actually death traps. You know, one day while coding the game's physics and having lunch at the same time, one Nadeo employee spilled his spaghetti all over his keyboard, and believe it or not, there was a chemical reaction between the keycaps on the keyboard and the spaghetti sauce which released an incredibly toxic component into the computer and twisted all of the code lines in what is known as the spaghetti coding incident. When Hylis, the head creator of the game, saw that the game's physics were now completely twisted and broken, he immediately thought, oh cool, that's actually really funny and I don't give a f about this game anyways, and decided to keep it that way forever and go on with his day. You see, every road segment in Trackmania is composed by smaller roadblocks that look kind of like this. And when you mix them together to form a longer piece of road, the lines that separate each and every roadblock are still there. And because of the spaghetti coding incident, if you happen to land with your car flat on one of those lines, this happens. Thanks, Nadeo. What you have just witnessed is called a landing bug, and it is one of the few bugs in the game that players haven't yet found any particularly interesting use for. It just makes your car slow down, change direction, or flip upside down entirely. That's it. Fuck you, random Trackmania player, your day is now ruined. Because of this single bug, AO6 is an absolute nightmare of an RNG minefield. Every single jump is a leap of faith, every second in the air feels like a lifetime where you reconsider all your life choices and wonder if you're going to gracefully land on the road or get blasted by an invisible landmine. And if you think that's bad, the person who created this map was nice enough to add an extra way of completely screwing up your run. In the final jump to the finish, you land right before a slope on the road. So guess what? There are now 2 spots where you can get a landing bug. Before the slope and in the slope. Thanks, Nadio. Oh, and if you manage to get through it all, there are also some more poles right before the finish, strategically placed to completely change your mood for the day, in case you were happy. And to top it off, the author time in this map is really strong. I mean, really strong. It is barely 1 second off the current world record. It's almost like Nadio hired someone to drive an actual good time on this map. So if you were planning to get an author medal on AO6, you will now have to spend a reasonable amount of time on a dull, boring, annoying creation. But you know, there are some players that really don't care about how bad a map is. And none of these factors on AO6 hindered these players from going for fast times and battling for world records. The first record on AO6 was uploaded 4 days after the track was released, on the 16th April 2008, and the time was at 29.15 by AdriWeb. The run looks quite average up until the end section, where AdriWeb lands right on the slope and ends up getting some airtime right before the ramp. This is a huge mistake, as in Trackmania, more time spent in the air means less time spent accelerating and gaining speed. And in AO6, the key to a good time is getting as much speed as possible before the ramp. Later on the same day, a new world record was uploaded, at 28.51 by the player Alaka. On the first few jumps, Alaka used a technique called air brake, which consists of braking in the air to stabilize your car's position, allowing for a smoother landing. But in the end section, Alaka also got a tiny bit of airtime, which would cost him about 0.2 of a second. It seemed like the end section was ruining every single run, and because the track had just been released, the correct way of approaching it was still a mystery amongst the vast majority of the players, and getting that small bit of airtime right before the ramp seemed pretty much inevitable. But on the exact same day, 16th of April 2008, a player would upload a groundbreaking world record. On the first jump, instead of using the ramp to its full length, the player Karjen used the side of the ramp to get an earlier landing on the road, granting him a small advantage when compared to the average flat landing. This trick is known as a ramp cut, and is almost always faster than driving a ramp normally if done correctly. But Karjen had another trick up his sleeve. He had already figured out the end section. You see, in the previous 2 records there were 2 main things in common. Both Alaka and AdriWeb used an air brake in the final jump, and they also both lost a lot of speed right before the ramp. So if we use our brains for a bit, we can quickly figure out that these 2 factors probably have some sort of correlation. So in his run, Karjen did not air brake in the final jump. As a result, he lands with his front wheels first, right before the slope, which consequently makes them go up. He then lands with his back wheels on the tip of the slope and manages to keep grip on the road with his front wheels, getting the perfect amount of speed just before the ramp. A 28.16 seconds. If we compare Karjen's run with the previous world record, we can see that they are not that far apart right at the slope jump. But because Karjen kept full grip on the road and Alaka didn't, Karjen gets a huge lead and beats the record by 0.35 of a second. With the end section finally figured out, the key element to get a good time on AO6 was to just make good usage of the side ramp trick. It sounds pretty easy, but it really isn't. The trick is really inconsistent because of 2 main reasons. When you use the side of the ramp to jump, there is a chance that your car tilts a tiny bit too much and your wheels will no longer keep grip on the road, resulting in a huge loss of speed. Another thing that can and certainly will happen if you try to use the side of the ramp is called edge bug. When you drive on the edge of a platform, it is very likely that an edge bug happens, which will make your car jump or tilt randomly, and sadly, this also applies to the edge of the ramp. Thanks, Nadio. But none of this would stop avid Trackmania players from continuing to play the track. And in the end of 2008, the standing world record was now at 28.08 by the player Yam. Yam's record was really strong. He got an extremely good side ramp cut and an almost flawless end section, with no possible improvements perceivable at a first glance. It is common knowledge in Trackmania that when you think you've reached the limit, you're only pushing it further away. And even when you can't see any way of beating a record, there is always room for improvement. And on the 16th July 2009, the player M14 would prove this right, by beating Yam's record by 0.05 of a second. 28.03 was achieved. With the world record getting closer and closer to a 28 flat, there was only one question left to answer. Is it possible to go under 28 seconds? On AO6, the key to a good run is basically to just get a good ramp cut. But when the time gain from a ramp cut seems maxed, how can we improve it further? The simple answer is, we just go for more than one ramp cut. There are 5 ramps in AO6, the time you could gain with 2 or even 3 consecutive ramp cuts would be insane. But if executing one perfect side ramp trick is so hard, how insanely difficult would it be to pull off multiple ones in a row? You have to execute the trick almost flawlessly to even benefit from any time gain. This idea seemed so ridiculous that for most people it would remain just that, an idea. But it takes someone to put ideas to work. If no one had taken action, most of the things we have today and that we take for granted would be just ideas. And on the 20th May 2010, someone took action. Meet the player Luffy. .28 flat. By 1/100th of a second, Luffy did not break the 28-second barrier. But he proved that the idea of getting multiple ramp cuts was worthy of being attempted. But still, for most people, a 27-second time was deemed impossible. Luffy's record stood for almost 2 years unbeaten, and on the first day of 2012, a new era would begin. .3 PM, 1st of January 2012. The player Demon was playing AO6 when he casually broke the 28-second barrier. It may not seem like much, but for the community it was a huge achievement. But it doesn't end here. Only 5 months after, the player Racehands improved the world record to 27.98. And he didn't stop playing AO6, even after getting the world record. He wanted more. Over the course of more than a year, Racehands would improve his own world record not once, not twice, but 4 more times. And on the 7th December 2013, Racehands would set a staggering world record of 27.88. That was it. There was no way of further improving this record. Or that's what people thought. There was a huge time saver yet to be executed. In the deepest parts of TMX, a site where people can post their own and review other people's maps, you can also find the official campaign maps. And on the comments section of AO6, there was a gem that had been hidden in plain sight for 1.5 years. a link to a video that showcased a failed run by the player Damager. But it wasn't an ordinary run. Instead of ramp cutting, Damager used the ramp to get a full flip, meaning his trajectory is way lower when compared to a normal ramp cut, and he gets a huge advantage over race hands. But on the third jump, he gets an unfortunate land bug and his run is dead. Even though it was a failed run, Damager proved that race hands' record was not unbeatable. So people started hunting for the world record using the ramp flip. There were tons of players trying to get the magical flip, but most of them ended up with pitiful fails. Because there's a rule in Trackmania which says, when you think you have a good run, no you don't. 2 years went by with no sign of a flip world record, and the leaderboard for AO6 went silent. But on the 7th October 2015, the player playerbase got this miracle run. A 27.85, beating race hands by 300ths of a second. 2 years later, the player Alien improved the world record to a 27.80 using the same flip strategy. AO6 was finally broken and no one would bother to hunt it any longer. No one but the player Logic, who 2 years and a half later got this run. A 27.66, a huge improvement that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Perhaps this was the last major improvement on AO6, or maybe someone someday will prove once again that no track in Trackmania is pushed to the limit, but for now, we'll just have to wait and see. If you watched this video all the way to the end, just know that I really appreciate you, and remember to leave a like and subscribe, it helps the channel grow and makes me happy. Thank you for watching.